Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. I'm a certified executive coach. What I do is I help driven, experienced, emerging, and evolving leaders remove your roadblocks so you can achieve more impact, influence, and income. And today we'll be talking about those success elements that are hardwired into your DNA that defines how much impact, influence, and income you will receive and how you will be able to elevate your career most successfully based on those elements. Now, if you have never seen my smiling face before, you can learn more about me at coachurban.com. And of course, don't forget the podcast, which is available on all the major channels, iTunes, Spotify, you name it. It's out there, including YouTube as well. And today, hi, someone just tuned in from LinkedIn. I bet that's DB Tunsil. Great to see you this morning. Speaking of, if you're just tuning in, please say hi, say where you're from, say your name, because I can't always see your name. And I definitely want to welcome you to the show as you hop on live today. And just know that we are here to answer your questions. So we're talking about these exciting success elements that are hardwired into your DNA. We definitely want to hear from you and what your thoughts, questions are, because you can kind of say that we're captive audience, captive coaches here for you to help you elevate your career. Good morning, Cornisha. Great to see you. So today, what are we talking about? These 5 DNA, success elements. What is this? Yes, in fact, you do have hardwired gifts, and we will learn how to leverage your authentic core self, as Anna Stephenson says. Now, she is the authentic core life coach, and she will be sharing the 5 aspects of body, mind, and soul each individual has uniquely wired for your authentic core self. Now, leveraging these will give you a fulfilling, successful career. I'm really interested in learning more about how to do that inner exploration to launch your most successful and satisfying career, and how to discover the raw talents, drives, and purpose wired into our DNA. I'm really excited to talk to Anna about what sparked her desire to discover this stuff in the first place. So let's learn a little bit about Anna. Anna helps on-purpose men and women who are ready for inner exploration launch their most successful and satisfying career by discovering raw talents, drives, and purposes wired into their DNA. So I don't know about you, but I'm very excited to have Anna on the show. Anna, it's great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited to learn about this because when I first learned about you, I was like, hardwired DNA? Now, this is right up my alley because most of you know I'm kind of a neuroscience nerd. So I'm very excited to learn more about these 5 success elements. And I know you kind of have a backstory, Anna. What drove you to learn more about this? What was it that sparked your passion in this area?
Well, it was most certainly my lifetime journey. And thank you, Erin, for having me here. I'm so looking forward to sharing this great info. And yeah, for me, it all started with my own personal journey down to rock bottom. You'll recognize my profile exactly. I'm the high achiever, the type A, the get the deliverables. Kind of almost like an embarrassing backstory is in high school, I was voted the most likely to succeed. And it wasn't because I was the popularity person. It's because I was the smart achiever, high grades, all of that. And I felt like I had a lot of potential. And I just set out on my career path, trying a little bit of everything, trying to be great at everything. And it turns out that will burn you out really fast. Especially if you don't have a clear inner sense of your inner drives, a bigger picture of what your life's about, and the knowledge of what your personal strengths are that you're a little better at than others, that you can develop your skill and competency in really quickly and step into leadership from that. I had no idea about the inner information, the self-awareness. Right. So when I had a an exit interview from a company I was working for in management consulting, and they said, some feedback that was like both shocking and also I knew exactly what they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you really don't seem like, your heart's in it, or, like this is the long term for you. Yes, you work 80 hours and you do all of the stuff. And yet, is this really what you want to do for your long-term path?
Mm-hmm.
So I took a little hiatus. I went back to grad school. I thought more about how am I going to really find out what that is correct for me. And so that's what started me on the path to discovering my own DNA for success.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what helped me put that program together to guide others through a similar process. So now I know there's the external data, what those career possibilities are, what the market's doing, but I also know the internal data, which is equally important to aligning myself to a job and a career path that's interested in, or that's set up for me to have longevity in,
Mm-hmm.
that's set up for me to develop skills really quickly in, and I know my path to growth because I know what my inner strengths and weaknesses are. So I continue that professional development every single day.
That's great. So now you know what lights your spark, if you will.
I know it lights my spark.
That's really important. I want to say hi to Glenn Wiggins for tuning in from DC. Nice to see you, Glenn. And Venice tuning in from Houston, Texas as well. Great to see all of you this morning. And as we go through our show today, know that you can ask any questions you want. So I'd love to hear from you if you are kind of resonating with this story so far, kind of high performer, trying to do all the things right. I've been there too, and it was not an enviable place to be. Here's the thing, though. Don't you agree, Anna, that we kind of feel like, unless we're educated otherwise, that we should try to do all the things, we should try to be perfect. I know that a lot of high performers I coach do suffer from some level of perfectionism and overachievement syndrome, right?
Yes, you are 100% right. And you're giving a preview into one of the elements here because that really relates to our inner drives that are usually pretty far below the surface. Not so much in like your logic where, oh yeah, I know this is what's driving me. But there's some things down below the surface a little bit in your subconscious. I always use the iceberg example. I like that.
Yeah.
There's 85% of the information you need to know about yourself is under the surface of like your easy access. Mm-hmm. So I'm always training people, okay, how do you access all of that good data in there and your inner drives driving you to that perfection and such? Absolutely. Once you know why you're doing that, you can shift to a much healthier version of what that looks like. And I can go into that later too.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to learn about that because I kind of had to bumble around and find that out the hard way. And a little bit about, what you do, what I do is aligned at some levels. I've talked about the zone of genius, like how do you show up most powerfully in your work-life space? It was interesting, you mentioned that, this work is very equally important as understanding how you show up in your career. I would have to say that this type of work is actually more important. Because if we don't put this first, if we don't understand that 80% below the surface there, that's really driving us. What is our zone of genius? What is our strengths? What's our DNA success elements? That authentic core. We don't understand that. We're inevitably going to jump from the frying pan into fire and in one unfilling position and experience into another one, into another. And the cycle will just continue until you break it with knowledge.
You absolutely nailed it. Yeah, and we're not really taught how to see what the blind spots are and how to have that self-awareness and what the different components are that we could even know about ourselves.
Right.
So, yeah, it's time for us to know this. It's such great
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so needed. And I'd love to hear from anyone tuning in. Like, do you feel like sometimes that you are just showing up kind of robotically in your career? I know I've been there. You're going through the motions, but your heart is not in it. And you feel like, gosh, I really should, because maybe the career, it's a good commute, or it's a good company, or the people are nice, or you make good money. However, something's not quite working. And you're not happy. All right. So let me know if that's you. And good morning, Phil, tuning in from Cypress, Texas as well. So I talked a little bit about what your wake up call was, Anna.
Yes.
That was really important. And I would love to also hear a little bit about, before we dive in those 5 success elements, I think people want to know what that number one reason is that people struggle with overwhelm and stress at work. Is it that misalignment that we just talked about?
Yes, that's exactly right. I can answer that question in detail as we go through each one of those success elements. If you're in a job or in a role that is not in tune with your natural abilities that are wired in your DNA, you're always going to feel like you're struggling, you're working extra hard, but you're not accomplishing as much as the other people around you who may be more aligned. So, and we talked about drive. Are you being driven by maybe a less developed drive that keeps you in a cycle over and over without being able to expand your awareness and say, oh, I see why I'm doing what I'm doing. Here's how I can take that in a more developed direction.
So if someone were to be curious and want to know more about, how can I find out what these success elements are, what would be that first kind of telltale sign, or maybe that first element that they need to focus on?
Well, here's another key point I think that you might agree with, Aaron, is that your sense of fulfillment, versus your sense of, say, struggle and unfulfillment or dissatisfaction, those kind of emotions or feelings are actually data. It's a way that your inner compass is speaking to you and saying you're not aligned with your design. Right. And so if you're having a sense that there's something more, or why am I working so hard and not getting ahead, or I'm not really fulfilled, that's a good sign that you're ready for some more of that inner data, so that you can align your career with your 5 elements in your DNA.
That's really important. That's important, because a lot of people feel like, oh, well, here's what keeps people from really recognizing this. I'm calling it out there. I'm being honest with everybody tuning in to either this live or the replay or podcast later on. What keeps us stuck in unfulfillment and feeling like that's the way it just is because of all the myths out there about, how you need to work hard, and it's all about true grit, and we're worshiping misery. Quite frankly, we do. As a culture, we worship misery because we think that's how it should be, and that's a load of crap. Okay, it is. It's a complete load of crap. You do not have to be miserable to be successful. You do not have to work yourself to death to be successful. That is actually not true. That is a falsehood that has been perpetuated by who knows who, perhaps our hardworking, pioneering ancestors that, God love them all. It was the way it used to be, because if you weren't careful, you might not get, shot by somebody. I can say that in Texas, where, this close to the Wild West. Anyway, so irregardless of where it comes from, it has been a cultural expectation. I feel that keeps people from allowing themselves the grace and the space to do some really good work with people like yourself, right? So with that being said, what does that first step look like? What's that first element look like? And how can they start that journey, right?
Oh, such a good question. I love to start people out with just getting familiar with their natural career abilities. Now, I have to do just a tiny neurobiology lesson here, and this is going to be way more simple than you could teach, I'm sure, Aaron. But the idea is that from the time that you're born, you have a foundation that is unique in your neural connections. So your brain and your body is full of neurons, your neural cells, and they connect and they form pathways in different people in different ways. And when you're born, you have a sort of foundation. And that includes natural abilities that you're wired for, as well as several others that we can talk about later. But it basically means that there are certain activities and there are certain ways of thinking that your brain already has pathways that other people don't, that if you engage those through, learning, activity, experience throughout your life, you will grow skill and you will grow speed in those areas faster than anybody else would. It's just a natural super highway that you can build very quickly in skill.
Interesting.
So I'd like to start there because it's not too much of a deep dive. We're not going all the way down to the bottom of the iceberg here.
We're not going, well, so why does that make you feel that way? And
right.
Not yet.
We're not at inner drive yet.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. It's very true. I mean, if you look at some of the work Carl Jung has done years and years ago, which has fueled the assessments like Berkman, Myers-Briggs, and DISC. I'm not a huge fan of Myers-Briggs, and the only reason is from someone who implements assessments like that in companies, it's not very successful because it's too complex. But irregardless, based on some of that research, we know that certain people have natural inclinations that others don't.
Yes.
And we all have that. It is hardwired to a great degree. Now, while you can flex quite a bit, let's just say introversion, extroversion is one of those, for example. If you are an identified introvert or extrovert, you will not suddenly leap over and become the opposite. That doesn't happen. However, you can flex a lot on the scale. Now, for myself, who I'm actually classified as an ambivert, right in the middle, components of both, it's a very weird place to be. That kind of thing, overall doesn't vastly change, right? I mean, we can flex. And it makes sense to me because I'm not a math person. My husband totally is. He does it for fun. I'm like, what's wrong with you? But it's natural for him. It's just not my thing. Right?
Absolutely. And I think so many of us can say, I'm not a math person, or I am a taste, texture, touch person, or I am a great three-dimensional thinker, or my ideas just pop into my mind really quickly. And we don't even think that that's a natural ability. We think, well, everybody can, or, well, that's just normal. And in truth, it turns out that those things are often extra special to us. And the more we capitalize on them, the more you specifically engage in building that particular in your daily tasks at work and life, the faster you grow to, skill and ease.
So for anybody tuning in, I'd love to hear, what are those things that come naturally and easily to you? Because here's the thing, I oftentimes call them gifts, and they'll fly under the radar because sometimes they're not sexy. They're not like, I have a gift of public speaking, or whatever that is, or I'm a gifted actor. Sometimes it's you have a gift with plants. I have a gift with plants. I have a green thumb. It came from my grandfather. It was inherited. Good for me, but it's just not, some people have different types of gifts, but what's your gift? I'd love to hear from those of you who are tuning in. What's your gift, and does it connect with your career? That might lead us to our next element, perhaps. I'm not sure if it does or not, because I'm just as much in the dark as anybody else. So tell me, what's our next one?
Well, and I don't mind sharing a quick example from my own life. My natural abilities, when I knew them objectively, I kind of had to accept it. I'm really wired to be an adult educator. That's not sexy in the world that I come from, in the family I was raised in.
I think, and look, you're coaching, so.
Yeah. So I had to, kind of disconnect with what I thought would make me look great or would be something that, would and somehow be that sexy role, and say, you know what, I have to dive in here because actually this is the work that when I have an exit interview, they're like, please don't leave. And I've had so much fun doing it along the way. So I'm really glad you brought up that point.
Yeah, that's really important. I want to say hi to Art Dela Cruz, who's tuning in. Great to see you, Art. And Carnisha mentioned, she said, people have gifts, people have the gifts of organization and empathy. So I don't know, Kanisha, if you're talking about yourself, I highly agree. You do have the gift of organization and empathy. So it's important to know these types of things about yourselves, and we all have more than one. Where the dissonance comes in is we're not, if those gifts are the antithesis of what we're actually doing or not leveraging them.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So that can take us into the next element, which is your brain's optimal focus. And we tend to think, well, I can do anything, right? I just have to put my mind to it and put the energy behind it. But actually, your brain is wired to focus on a certain category of information that it wants to use your natural abilities within. So those categories are something that maybe without even noticing it. And again, this is a process of becoming aware. It's a category of information that you notice right away. When you walk in a room, you notice it. When you read something, you notice it. And you want to take action on it to improve that particular area. Now, it could be something like the softer type of skills, like how's everybody doing on the team and what do we need to do to make sure everybody's bringing in their best contribution. Or it could be an emphasis on noticing the problems that are going on here and want to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of how we're getting things done. Those would just be two examples. But when you start to step back a little bit and take a look at yourself and say, what is it that I notice that I'm not even realizing? And that, I feel like if we don't take action on that, we're really missing something. This is your brain's optimal focus.
Interesting. So for those people that walk into the room and automatically start finding fault, and they're not always negative Nellies, they could be just that's how they're wired. They're wired to try to improve things, or a version of that. But that's how they're wired. They're wired to see these things first versus, and some people are metrics driven. Oh, okay, what's our numbers? How are we doing? And some people see the people in the room, which equals productivity, which is leading to a lot of interesting return and re-entry into the workplace. Some people are like, managers like, no, they have to be there because their presence means it's productive. No. But anyway. But it's just what their natural inclination is.
Yeah, and you said the negative Nelly, always looking at, this problem and that problem. That is, she probably has, her brain is optimally designed to focus on that. So, interestingly, the category that our brain is wired to focus on usually means a sort of opposite category our brain can be blind to. Like, I see the problems and I know how to fix them. We so need that in every team for sure. And then the blind spot that comes with that is usually, how are the people doing in the room? And what do we need to do to bring all of them up to their best performance?
Very interesting.
So this is one of the examples of how knowing yourself gives you a really clear map to your best steps for development in leadership, in team role, in all of those things.
That is very important, because part of being able to elevate yourself in your career is knowing what those blind spots are, because if you don't, then chances are those blind spots will keep dragging you down. It will be that invisible vacuum, because holding you back. Because and also know that while we are blind to our blind spots, other people aren't.
Yes.
So that may play a part as well. So I'm interested to know, What? I'm okay. What's number three? You baited me now with one and two, so I'm ready now. Give me number three.
Well, number three, we already got a hint about earlier, and that is your deepest drives.
Mm.
So I'm going to start this one out by just telling a story to begin with, because it's one of the ones that is deeper down at the bottom of our awareness usually. I was just recently talking with a market executive, and she said, I've peaked in my career. I've done every role at the highest level in every aspect of marketing, and I'm really feeling drawn to something new. I want to work in nonprofit. I want to spend more time at home with my child. I just want to have some freedom in my schedule, for God's sakes, for a while. And yet she said, I don't know. I'm still thinking I should just jump back in and keep on doing what I have been doing. And so as we were talking, she suddenly realized, oh my gosh, I know what is underneath all of this, and that is actually going to make this decision for me. She said, I can't believe it. And it sounds so silly, but I am driven at whatever age, after making so much money, all these high positions, I'm driven to prove my worth to my parents.
Ooh.
So you can see how deep down these go, way back to childhood.
And so, it's totally true though. I mean, when I start doing work around conscious language coaching, for example, which is basically the words we choose and put into either our internal narrative or articulate actually drive our outcomes and further cement our mindsets, etc., and can sabotage us, particularly for trying to establish a different mindset, and we keep articulating the things that are opposite to that and reaffirming in our brains that no, this is that, like life is hard. Simple things, right? That we reaffirm. And I encourage people to go back to, okay, what was your familial structure? What was normal? Take, for example, my family, hard workers, really hard workers. In fact, if you didn't work hard, what were you living for? What were you doing? What are you doing if you're not working hard? I mean, what's wrong with you? So it was this very much work, almost for the sake of doing things. And, this is the way it should be. So it's, understanding that deep drive so you can then rescript if you need to. Which yes. I'll shut up now and I'll let you tell me, because you were like, yep, and I need to say those stuff.
You really had an important point there, because it's easy to describe the unhealthy side of what, say, for example, her drive was there, proving my worth. But every drive has a more developed and healthy version if we're aware of it and developing it. So in her case, she looked to the more healthy side of that drive, which was having her focus so much on worth and value. And she realized, you know what? I am wired to be a person who just naturally wants to deliver high value wherever I go. Mm-hmm. And now she could say, instead of being tied to, I have to prove myself in a certain way, it became, where would I like to add value next? Completely changing her inner drive. Or, the voice that her inner drive was using, and keeping her stuck in her decision or freeing her up to follow all the elements of her DNA for success.
That's really important, because what you're doing there is, while you are rescripting, you're not moving away from the natural drive. So it's still a natural. That's so important. And actually, you're the first person that's actually articulated that. So this is really an important moment on Career Coffee Chat, folks. I don't know if you know this, but you are the first person who's identified that, instead of pulling people out of their zone of, their natural zone of being, let's leverage the strengths that are there and turn them into strengths. Because yes, they can have a negative connotation. I mean, any strength used in excess can be negative, or depending on how you perceive it, how you use it, how it expresses itself. and it also has a more positive expression. So what is that, and understanding that and being able to leverage that, that's really important. I want to say hi to Robert, who just tuned in a little while ago, and he said, I showed up just in time. We're blind to our blind spots, but other people aren't. And this is one reason why coaching is so important. People are like, oh, what's the value of coaching? What do you do? No, we're not just going to ask you how you feel about things. It's giving you that perspective into those areas that we're just so used to it, we can't see it.
100%.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. So now that we've got a more positive spin on our deeper drives, making sure they're working for us and not against us, what do we do next?
Well, step 4 actually can be really fun. This one is, okay, we're going back to a little neurobiology here. We've talked about the first 3 elements, which are pretty much hardwired in from the time you're born. And there's wiggle room, of course, in how they develop, but they lay a foundation of neural networks. Now, the next steps we're going to talk about are neural layers that build on top of those. So the next step is to tune into your most fascinating interests, your most meaningful values, and your vital purpose. So it's kind of those. Go ahead.
It sounds much more than just vision and values to me. It sounds like vital purpose. So that's pretty deep, right?
Yeah. Yes, you're exactly right. It's not just something you sit down and brainstorm and I'm done. This is, you actually can connect the dots when you look at each element of your DNA for success, the elements we've been talking about here, and they will draw a path for you to what your vital purpose is based on who you are born to be in your DNA.
Wow. I think I'm going to get this done for me.
I would love to. That'd be so fun.
That'll be great. So for those of you tuning in, let me know what has resonated with you so far. And most importantly, we mentioned before, but do you feel like your vital purpose is actually aligned with your career? Yes or no? And if yes, great. Talk a little bit about how you're leveraging it. As we mentioned before, we all have these natural inclinations. And whatever they are, we want to be able to leverage those within our work life. Right? And when we're not is when we feel dissonance and disconnected and frustrated and stuck and stagnated and burnout. All these negative emotions start emerging and negative experience emerges. So what are those for you? Are you aligned? Are you not? And if you are, how are you leveraging it? Because I'd love to know more about that, because it might also, thinking through that might give you a little insight into how you can leverage a little more, because oftentimes what we're doing is we're trying to fill in the gaps and make ourselves all perfect and even, and no. Stop wasting your time doing that and leverage your strengths. So now we're at the big 5. We're at the big 5.
Yep, number 5. And this one is usually something that we're just very unaware of, but will absolutely keep you in indecision if you're at a crossroads in your career, trying to choose your path, or just keep you very stuck and feeling like, life isn't making sense, work isn't making sense. I know I have more potential than this. Why can I not step into it? So the number 5 is your success mindset. Ooh. And this relates to, again, this is a layer of neural connections that you will have built in over your lifetime that are thoughts and beliefs about yourself, work, your specific career.
Yes.
And I love to give an example in this one. There was a client I was working with, and she was successful in her day job, but what she loved was her hobby job. And that was interior designing homes. And, everyone who knew her was saying, you have to do this for a living. But instead, she stayed in her other job, very, just frustrated and unfulfilled. So when we sat down to look at her mindset around her career, she just listed some of the most common ones that I'm sure, I could agree, some of us all can relate to. First, she would say, well, I can't step into being a designer, open a business, charge money for it because I'm in midlife. You can't start midlife in a new career and expect to be successful in it. True successful people have been doing it their whole lives, right?
Right,
Look at
right, right.
Mozart. He started when he was 4.
No.
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 Or how about I don't have a degree in design, therefore I cannot be successful in it.
Right. Another excuse. Yeah. Good one.
Another very common one.
Yeah.
And so for her to be able to say, oh my gosh, these were in the back of my mind. It's not like I got them out and they were on my list of pros and cons for how I was deciding what to do. They were just in the back of my mind, forming a lens, a mindset lens for how I was looking at myself and my opportunities, what was real for me or not. So, from the outside looking in, we can easily say, well, none of those things are true, but they really feel true to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I call those limiting beliefs, and
limiting beliefs.
It's a part of our, internal narrative and articulated narrative. Those conscious language choices we make, or actually they're totally unconscious. That's why I call it conscious language coaching, because you have to become conscious of the unconscious, because they are completely unconscious. They just fall out of your face, and you don't really even think about it. It's like that, and there it is. Like my mother. Several months ago, we were looking at the stars, talking about life as I, drove her home after dinner. And she was like, well, you know how it is. If not one thing, it's another. I was like, what are you saying? Stop making that expectation in your life, because if that's the expectation you set, that is the experience you will have. Whatever we articulate is setting ourselves up for that expectation.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So, entrepreneurs, from time to time, I will coach other coaches, and we do a lot of work around, okay, what is your belief structure about money, wealth, happiness, success, work, all these belief structures, and understanding, first of all, understanding what they are and getting them out consciously, because until you can identify them, until you name it, you can't tame it.
It's running the show if you're not aware of it.
That's right. You have to name it to tame it.
Absolutely.
This has been really exciting.
Once you tame a natural belief, she could change it to, well, I'm not even starting a new career. I've been doing this my whole life. I've restored historic homes in world-class cities. I sold my last personal home for $200,000 above asking price because people love what I do at the house. So she's shifted from her thoughts and beliefs that had developed a lot over time but weren't true. And she shifted to looking out into the real world and seeing, well, what do the facts actually tell me? And Erin, it doesn't necessarily change the fact that you have some doubts along the way, but the more you embrace and replace with the new, more factual beliefs, the more supportive your inner environment is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so true. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I would like to get some other thoughts from you about, current trends based on what you know as a coach and based on these 5 elements for success is hardwired in our DNA. Because what I'm seeing is an alarming trend, continually alarming trend that's been ongoing for some time, that employers expect more out of employees, more and more and more and more, less resources. They expect you to know more, and now we're going into a very hybrid work environment, which, by the way, is temporary. And we'll be talking more about that in the months to come and why it's temporary. So there is no new normal yet, but how do you see, this playing a role in our future to come, and how this is so incredibly important? And we know that employers are asking more and more out of employees. What do you see to come, based on that information?
Well, you're absolutely right. We're asked of a lot, and we're asked more and more in our work environments. And when you know what your strengths are, what energizes you, but also what you need in order to refresh and restore, when you know what your specific real contribution and value that you can add in a project and where not so much, when you know the ultimate target for when I get to the end of my life, what do I want my 90,000 lifetime hours at work to have been about and to create? Then you have a really clear inner compass for saying, yes, this is what I will step into. This is what I will spend 80 hours a week on for this time. Or you will say, this is where we need to bring in somebody else. It'll really help you tailor into where you will really add the highest value, the highest performance, the highest contribution, but in a way that works for you and that, gives you that life energy and that fulfillment.
Right. Yeah, that's so important. You're absolutely right on target, because the more information you have and the more informed you are, the better decisions you can make, and the better boundaries you can establish. You can also have more, I would say, impetus, more energy to defend, if you will, those boundaries and make sure you maintain them to your own health and well-being and benefit. And what I'm seeing too, harshly, cautiously optimistic about Naomi Osaki's recent bold move in tennis, where she said, no, I'm not playing the game, literally and figuratively, with the media. This gives me anxiety. It's not healthy for me. I'm stepping away. And also having a lot of big names to support that. Hopefully will start a trend for people acknowledging that individualism is where we need to be focusing our time and space and energy, and honoring people's individual strengths and talents, versus trying to make everybody the same and stuffing everybody into little pegs, and putting them in the big wheel of corporate, whether that be performing, you're a professional athlete, whether you be a high performer or otherwise. It's something that I'm cautiously optimistic about, because we need to have more emphasis about this and understand the importance of this information and leveraging this to elevate your career and your life, right?
100%. And when you have even the concept that, wow, I can actually speak to my boss about what does work for me, sign up for the aspects of the project that do, etc., you can actually be contributing more, and you can have the words to have those conversations instead of like, I'm just, no, and I don't know why, or I just have to keep pushing and do it all. You'll have the language and the clear image of why you need to make the decisions that you do, and how they add to delivering more value anyway, even if it's not in the exact way that it was maybe requested of the boss at the time.
Absolutely. And this goes, for, coming back into reentry. Some roles will be remote, some will be hybrid, some will be in the workplace full time. You can have these kinds of conversations where you show up most powerfully and make those requests more succinctly and more effectively. And additionally, for those of you who are still seeking or looking for opportunities perhaps in the future, this type of knowledge will help you land those opportunities that fit you best, versus, and I see it all the time, oh, well, I'm just going to spruce up my resume, talk about everything I have done, and expect to get something different. It doesn't work like that. In order to get something new and different, you have to talk the right language to resonate with whatever it is you want to attract. If you don't, you will just get more of the same and continue to be frustrated and unfulfilled. Well, Anna, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show. Any parting comments? I know you have a course coming up, or has just been launched.
Yes, thank you for asking. I did just launch an online version that could take you more deeply into your 5 elements in your DNA for success, if you're interested in doing that. And it's got so many examples. It's got more details about what they all mean, and it has do-it-yourself worksheets so that you can dive in more deeply and begin to discover your 5 elements for success and then pull it all together.
Right, absolutely. You find more about that at authenticcorecoach.com. There's a banner at the bottom of the screen. We'll get you right to that location. And feel free to reach out to Anna on LinkedIn. Of course, she'll be happy to connect with you and answer any questions you have. And as far as the show or any questions you have about anything we've talked about here today, you know that you can reach out to us at any time, whether that be directly. in the show notes, comments, questions, what have you. And if you are listening to the podcast later, feel free to give us a thumbs up, a good rating on whatever venue you're watching through. And as always, it's been a deep pleasure, first of all, Anna, to have you on the show. It's been a lot of fun. And, I'm a big nerd about neuroscience. I'm like, oh, this is so much fun to learn about this kind of information. And for those of you who are tuning in later, as I mentioned before, feel free to pop your comments in. We'll be happy to answer them. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, fans, friends, family, it's been a pleasure. Keep elevating.